Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In the previous video, we looked at the activity monitor, and we gave you a brief introduction of what its primary purpose was, and that was to look at a quick snapshot of your server and its resources and see if there's any issues. And the way we did that, we right-click the server, go to Activity Monitor, and this gives you a synopsis of what the process is and data files that will be utilized, and we give an example of what kind of queries that we're running in the background that we can determine. However, this was a quick introduction to it, and it was a good monitoring tool to see a snapshot of what's going on. However, if you really want to get into the service performance issues of SQL, which we do, then we have to go beyond this tool here. And what we actually have to do is go into the system monitor. So let's look at that. So I'm going to close this right now and go to our notes. So what is the SQL Performance Monitor? And you'll notice that I have SQL in parentheses, and that's because it's really not a SQL-based tool, but actually it's a Windows monitoring system. So the Windows Performance Monitor, or PerfMon, is a great tool to capture metrics for your entire Windows server, and including if you have SQL Server in your instance, to capture that environment also. So it had easy graphical tools and graphical encounters that you can select to find a specific issue at hand, and that's what we'll be demonstrating in this video. Now, with these encounters, you can look at the .NET issues, the disk issues, the memory, the processors, the network, and certainly many of the encounters that are related to SQL Server. And this is what we're going to be devoting the next several videos to, is trying to find what encounters that we can monitor to get the health of our SQL Server. So that allows us to do this. So the primary purpose of the SQL Performance Monitor or the PerfMon, is to identify metrics you like to use and measure the SQL Server performance by collecting them over time and then getting what's called a baseline. And we'll be showing you that in a second. So what are encounters, and what encounters should we use? Well, the answer is depends. Counters are a method to measure current performances as well as performance over time. And I'll be demonstrating what counters are in a second visually, so you'll have an idea. And there are thousands of encounters. And as there are many encounters and there's no strict guidelines as to what specific encounter to use, I suggest we look at the most common ones for our demonstration, and then we can work with them. Now, what I mean by that is that, and what I mean by the word depends, and there are so many encounters, is that there are thousands of encounters, and there's no specific guideline as to what this DBS does. It depends on the issue that he or she is having, and then we select those encounters and try to navigate to those specific issues. As I said, the best approach is to use the common ones that I'm going to be showing you when the system is running fine, so we can create a baseline. Now, a baseline is an important tool to have. This allows us to measure when the system is running fine, and then when the system is running fine, we've gathered data about the counters. We can now base our performance issues based on that baseline. So I'll be showing you that in a second. So what kind of counters are we going to be looking at? Well, as I said, this is going to be a series of several videos. But there are Windows encounters that actually do the physical hardware, such as the memory, the physical disk, the network, and the processor. And then there's obviously some very specific ones related to an SQL Server instance encounters. And these are the ones we're going to be discussing in the next coming videos. So I'll be demonstrating that to you later. But for now, let's look at the SQL Server Performance Monitor and see how we even simply start it. So there are several ways to start the performance. Let me close this. One way is go to your desktop and click on the control panel, go to Administrative Tools, and there you'll see the icon for Performance Monitor, and you can click on it or double click, and it will pop up, and that's what it looks like. So that's one way of doing it. The other way, obviously, is if you go to now you may have a Start button here. So if you have a Start button, go there. Go to All Apps and go down, and obviously if you're going to see Windows Administrative Tools, and then you can see the Performance Monitor. Then you can click it, and that's another way. And then the last way to do it is through the run command. So bring up your run command, and the way I did that is I clicked on the Windows keyboard and pressed R, and then you get this, and you type in perfmon, P-E-R-F-M-O-N, and go OK, and that'll bring this window up. So in this video, as I said, there's going to be several videos dedicated to this. So what I'm going to do is now just give you an overall of the Performance Monitor and give you what the guidelines are. And so the first thing you want to notice is the Performance Monitor is, and if you click it, this graph appears. And this is where you're going to be capturing all what are called the encounters. And you're seeing one encounter right now. And this is called the processor time. So right now it's recording the processor time, and it's giving you a percentage of usage of that processor. And so this is it. Now, obviously, this is by default, and we can certainly get rid of it if we wish. A couple of things. If you look at the processor, since we only have one encounter, you can go right-click, and you can go to Properties, and you can look at the encounter of that properties. So just let's go over some of these quick tabs. If you click on the tab General, you'll notice that this vertical line is moving, and that's moving every second, obviously, or less than a second. We can change that if we want to capture less data here. But if you capture that and put, let's say, 5, you'll notice that, and you go, okay, you'll notice that it starts again, but it's not going to capture that data until 5 seconds have elapsed, and there it is. So each 5 seconds that will counter. So obviously that's not very intuitive, and we want to see it. So I prefer to leave it at 1, but you can change it if you wish. The other thing is, if you go to Source, I'll be talking about this later. Actually, if you look at the data, you can look at the encounters that are processing right now. As I said, this is the default processor that comes when you open it, and this is the information on it. You'll notice that if you want to change the color for any reason, this is by default red. If you want to change it, let's say blue, go OK, that'll change to blue. So if you want to change it for some reason, that's fine. The other thing is you can change the width if you want to change it to a little, and that's fine. And then obviously the last property of that is if you want to change the style, you can also, if you wanted to do it dots, whatever. Graphs. Now the other way you can view it is obviously we're viewing it what's called the line view. If you want to see it through a histogram bar, you can click on that and go OK, and then suddenly everything is in a histogram. Right click Properties, and let's go change that back to that. If you want a report, as you can see, a report basically gives you the numbers. And this is sometimes what I use because I just like to see the processor time, if I'm or if the encounter that I'm looking at. This is a very quick way of looking at it and seeing it. But again, it's entirely up to you which you want. Here you can change it also. You don't have to go over there. So if you go back to line, that's fine. Now, obviously, as I said, this is one encounter by default. If we want to get rid of it, you can get rid of this here. And there it is. And obviously, we can actually now start adding encounters. So to add an encounter, click on the green sign. And now, as I mentioned, there are hundreds of encounters here. Before that, you'll notice that you can remote into other instances and other servers if you wish. So if you have it, as long as it's in the network, if it's in the network, you can navigate to that server and look at its performance issues. So we're going to be on local. Now here are the main categories of encounters. You'll notice here there's a tremendous amount. And obviously if I click on this, there are sub encounters, if you will. And obviously it can be a tremendous amount if you just collect in all of them. So this is why when I say what encounters do you select, it depends, because it's depending on what issues you're having. Now, obviously, if we're having memory issues, then you'll go to the memory one. A couple of things you want to notice before I continue. You'll see here I have MS SQL $SQL 2014. And then if I scroll down here, you've got SQL Server. That's because I have 2 instances. Otherwise, you will not most likely see this. You will not see this MSQL. Most likely, you'll just see SQL Server. So don't let that confuse you. As you can see, there are a tremendous amount of encounters that we can select from. So let's say we want to look at the processor. Let's go to the processor or the physical. If I expand that, you'll see this tremendous amount. Now, obviously, I can click on Add button. It'll go to Add Counters here and select them all. Let's just do that actually and go OK. So now you can see that there's a tremendous amount of encounters, and there's a description here, the colors that each is using. So the processor time is using the red one. Now, obviously, you want to be judicious in determining what encounters you want, because obviously this can be taxing and it can be quite confusing, as you can see. One way to make the confusion easier, if you're trying to determine, for example, the interrupt time, and you're looking at blue and you still can't kind of see it here, one way to highlight it is literally highlight it. Go over to here and highlight, select the counter you want to look at, and click on the highlight button, and obviously you'll see it changes to black. Now obviously this encounter is not utilizing as much, and that may be the case. So let's look at processor times. There we go. Now that you get a better view of that. If you want to change, anytime you change these, it will actually highlight the selected one. So these are the processor sub-objects that you can look at, and so on. So obviously if you uncheck this, it will go away if you decide to do it, and if you check it, they'll come back, and so on. You can pause this as it's going. You can pause it, and there it is. Now it's paused. And let's say you wanted to take a little snapshot of this for metrics. If you're finding a spikes or plateaus, I should say, then you can go right-click or right-click here, and you can save image. So if you want to save image of that, I'm going to go to here, put test, or just put T for the sake of it, and go save. And now if I minimize that and go to my, you'll see that image has been captured. So it allows you to capture that image if you want to, for example, discuss this with other colleagues, and you want to say, hey, the CPU rate is going tremendously high at 80 or 90%, and here's a caption of it. So you can certainly do that. So that's another way of doing it. So we're going to start this again. Now the other thing is there's data collection sets, and I'll be discussing that in the next coming videos, and I'll be demonstrating that to you. But now you get an idea of what the SQL Performance Monitor allows you to do. It allows you to capture a tremendous amount of information about the SQL internals and determine. One thing I would certainly recommend, which we certainly do in the DBA world, is to create a baseline. So what is a baseline? Well, for example, if I were to ask you, let's say, if I go here and click on the processor time, and as you can see the one in black, it's about 45% utilization. Now, is that considered high utilization? Is that considered low utilization? Or is that medium utilization? And you don't know. And you don't know because you don't have anything to compare with. And that's what a baseline does. So what I usually do is I will capture this data, and I'll be showing you how to do that in saving files. You capture the data of a period of time, and then that's regarded as your baseline. And from there, as you collect more data on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, you can start comparing the processor time with this initial baseline. And next, later, if your baseline suddenly in a few months or a year is approaching 70, 80% in plateauing, and you're comparing it with this a few months or years ago, you can take that to administration or your IT department and say, hey, look, a few months ago or a few years ago, our baseline was 40% utilization of processor. And since the company's grown, now it's constantly 80%. So we may need a higher CPU or more CPUs or some hardware upgrades. So this is a great way of demonstrating that to your management. So this is the purpose of collecting information. It's a great way of collecting tool. So as I said, this is just correcting processor. In the next couple of videos, I'll be showing you what specifically I use to collect data. One thing you'll notice here is I'll demonstrate that to you again. Here, I just wanted to look at, obviously, it just gives you the numbers of that particular encounter that you've used, the average, the minimum, the max, and the duration of 1 minute, 40 minutes time, which is this length right here. So I hope this gives you an introduction of what the Performance Monitor do and its power. If I go here and click here, you'll see that there's a tremendous amount of resource. Let me go down and go to SQL Server. So you can see that there's a tremendous amount of SQL Server encounters that we can look against. And this is what we'll be doing in the next couple of videos. I'll be selecting a few ones that are utilized in the kind of common world, if you will. But again, it all depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to, for example, find buffer memory thing, then this is certainly the ones we'll look at, and then the specific one. The other thing I want you to note is that as I click on this, make sure you click on Show Description. As I click on that, it tells you what that encounter is, number of pages flushed to enforce the recovery interval. So this will give you a great idea of how to learn what specific encounters are and what their function is. So this is a great thing to check. So I would highly recommend that. And then obviously when you want to, for example, this is a great one that we'll be using in the next video. I want to add it, go OK, and it's added. And now obviously there it is. And if I just don't want to see that, obviously, the rest of them I can kind of check them, although it'd be easier to, take the processor out. And now I can just have that one buffer cache radio, and I can start looking at it. And as you can see, I can't see it because it's right up here, and this actually should be 100%. So that's great. If I uncheck it, you won't be able to see it. But if I check it, there it is. So again, so this is an introduction to the Performance Monitor, which you will be using in your environment. And I highly recommend you get used to this and start creating baselines. In the next couple of videos, I'll be showing you how to monitor both hardware resources, so we can have a baseline for resources, and then we'll move on to specific SQL encounters that are important that you should be measuring also. And that'll give you a baseline again. So I'll just leave it here, and my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video.